Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting... Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a billion-dollar transmedia property that began life as a manga created by Kazuki Takahashi in 1996 and quickly exploded into card games, video games, multiple anime series, movies. Way too much to cover on this podcast, but I'm really excited to be talking about it because this is something I'll admit I don't have a lot of personal familiarity with just because I'm an old man. But I'm very excited to have our guests on who know a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh! And are happy to talk about their experiences with it. Please welcome from the Play Along podcast, Ben, Jared, and Kai. Welcome, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
How's it going? Thanks for having us, man.
I'm not used to my name being
I know
first.
you're special, man.
Thank you for having
you're
us.
Special here.
So, guys, I reached out to you about what topic you might want to cover.
Yeah.
The consensus was Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'll start with you, Ben. Tell us about your personal connection to Yu-Gi-Oh! Why has this meant so much to you?
Oh, Lord. Pretty much from being a kid. That was like when I was first introduced to Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing like with my mates in like we lived in a block of flats, so we'd all sit in the stairwell and we'd all sit and play Yu-Gi-Oh! And looking back, we did not fucking follow the rules whatsoever. Like we just did what we wanted to do. But I grew up watching like the anime, playing the card game. Kind of fell out of it a little while, and then one day I was at a convention called Hyper Japan, and this stall was selling structure decks for Yu-Gi-Oh! For the trading card game. And I was with my mate, and I was like, a different mate, and I was like, dude, neither of us have played this for so long. Like, they're £5 a deck. Like, we should buy a deck and we should play. And that was it. And then now I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG player. And I've been out of the TCG for a couple of years, but I decided to get back into it. So my whole kind of thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of progressed from the anime into the card game. And yeah, I dipped into some of the animes now and then. But yeah, predominantly, currently, it's the card game. But a lot of love for like the first two series of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, it was interesting to kind of go back and research this and see, like, there was this initial anime show that had, like, 28 episodes.
Yeah.
And then it was the second series that caught fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the second series was...
the GX?
So the first series was... Well, so it depends, because, like, you've got 2 seasons of the first series. So the first series is the Duelist Kingdom, which is Yugi going to the island, battling Pegasus and... Bandit Keith and all of that lot. The second season was my favorite. That was the Battle City arc, which is when Kaiba hosts this massive tournament in a city, and there's like duelists fighting in the streets with holograms of all their different creatures, and that's when it kind of like Joey started using Time Wizard and Red Eyes become more prominent, and like that's when it was. That's when I remember thinking like, oh wow, this isn't just like some people on a field. Like, I can play this with people I know. Like, this dude's playing it in the street on this anime. Like, I can do that.
Yeah, and we'll get into it because you just threw a whole lot of proper nouns out there that I'm sure people who don't know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh are like, what the fuck is he talking about? And we'll get there. So, Jared, I want to hear from you about your personal experience. Where did you get on board with Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, so for me, it was probably very similar to Pokemon in the sense that like the card game and the TV show kind of came hand in hand for me. Like I started watching the show and almost immediately was like, I need to play this game, and then got the cards, and then it was all downhill from there of being obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh as a child, very much so. Yeah, I watched a lot of the first season, and I remember I watched GX, which was the following series. You know, it didn't have Yugi, the main character of the original anime. He wasn't in it. It was a new protagonist and everything like that. But Jaden, yeah, I think Jaden is he's the name. New set of cards, new rules and everything. But yeah, it was just that idea of like, same with Pokemon. I'm like watching this thing, watching kind of the rules happen, watching the story take place, and then be able to go and then use those same creatures and those same cards and everything with my friends, and the competitiveness to it. We would get really heated because we would play 4 cards, and then when people would lose, they wouldn't want to give up the cards they like put on the table for us. So I remember there's a lot of heated emotions as young children on the playground playing Yu-Gi-Oh, but it just added like a community base to it because we can trade, we can play the games, we can play the cards, and like you were saying, this is a huge, ever branching media where there was the video game side to it too. So a ton of the video games I also played with it. But no, I was very obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh for a long time there now, and now I occasionally play here and there. I think a couple years ago, Kai and I got back into it and we played. Oh gosh, Duel Links when the mobile game came out, and we played that a little bit. And then I know Master Duel is the one that's out now, and I dabble on it here and there, but definitely not as into Yu-Gi-Oh as I have been. But I definitely go through phases here and there where I get back into it and then I fall out and then get back into it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's got to be hard. No, sorry, I was going to say it's got to be hard because like modern day Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game is
Don't even get me started,
crazy.
dude. It just like you get one turn. I start a duel and then they just like change spells and everything, and I just lose in one turn. I'm like, why do I play this game anymore?
It has to be tough with something like this that's been around for a while and has developed so much. It's had, over 20 years almost to really kind of develop that. Like, if you're a kid now, I don't know, where do you get on the ground floor, and how do you catch up with something this complex?
Yeah.
It's got to be difficult. Kai, how about you? How did you start off with Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, I think probably like most people, it came from school.
Yeah.
And so we were, or especially myself, I'm the youngest one here, but kind of all the same generational timeline of Pokemon cards really blew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so in the same time period, Yu-Gi-Oh kind of took a back spotlight in the same way to that. And so I gravitated more, even though I was a Pokemon player at the time of the Game Boy games and kind of had that experience, I gravitated more to the art of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, like the darker, more interesting kind of side of things. And I remember friends at school having binders of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And so I started watching the original anime on WB Kids in the mornings, which was that first season. And really just fell in love with the franchise and the IP and the kind of concept around it. It was like the first real moment of something on TV being connected to something in my life, which was a very, foundational moment for me. And then I got my first cards at a swap meet, which were actually fake.
Yep. a lot of fake cards out there for
printer
sure.
cards, yeah, and like a shitty fake pack. And then I remember the first day I ever got a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I went to Trader Joe's with my parents because, fucking, I don't know. And they happened to stop at a Walmart that was next to the Trader Joe's, and I begged them for a pack. And I can still to this day remember the smell of the
card smell
cards in my parents' 2002 Mercury Sable in the worst color imaginable, which was a horrible gold color. And then additionally, my parents started using Yu-Gi-Oh cards as a reward mechanism for my education. For spelling tests, so they actually bought, when the cards first started coming here, they bought fucking Joey's starter deck. And they would dole out cards every spelling test. I would get to choose 3 cards from the deck. that I got 100% on spelling tests, and so like my entire childhood is directly linked with this franchise, and like everything, like I was obsessed. I had the dual
disc,
whatever,
the dual disc
the
on your
dual
arm.
disc that I had. I had
bro.
hundreds of cards. I had posters in my room. I had the movie CD. I went to McDonald's and collected all of the pieces of the fucking Millennium Pyramid that they were selling at the time in the Happy Meals. Like this was a very deeply meaningful IP for much of my youth.
Well, those dual discs were highly ineffective.
They really were. Also,
yeah, they're so expensive now. I wish I would have kept mine. I had two of them. I had both.
I'll go through TikTok and people will be co-op live streaming and they'll be playing Yu-Gi-Oh with the dual discs, and that's how they'll be playing Yu-Gi-Oh as like live stream on TikTok. And I was like, this is wild.
It's a story of life, right? Like if you would have kept all of that shit in perfect condition, like I mean, my cards would be worth thousands of dollars.
Every generation goes through that. It's the same. You know, my dad had probably baseball cards that, if he still had them, could have paid my way through college. You know, Everyone threw out their Star Wars toys. I told my parents. So I was born in 1980. I'm a kid of the 80s, and so first of all, I can't relate to Yu-Gi-Oh that much because it was just generational. I was in high school, like graduating high school as this was taking off,
right?
But I don't want that to be misconstrued as like, oh, I'm too good for this, because like I said, grew up on 80s cartoons. I have undying love for shit that makes this look like Shakespeare. So, but yeah, like I told my parents, like, do not throw away all those NES cartridges I have. Like, keep them.
Jeez,
Like, they're probably useless. I can emulate everything I owned, but at some point that physical object is maybe going to be worth something. That's my one thing I'm holding on to. But I really relate to what you're talking about, like kids just sort of bringing this into the playground. And the fact that it was tied to a card game, this collect-em-all card game like Pokemon was, that kind of made it a whole order of magnitude bigger, because, you know, every cartoon in the 80s that I grew up on was basically a toy machine. And there was no shortage of tie-ins for stuff. But there wasn't anything that, because it's this card game, you can just buy pack after pack after pack. They're all, so there's this you're collecting things, but they have a use. Right. And there's a way of like, now you're taking this like dueling that happens in the show and you're bringing it with you onto the playground to have to do with your friends. It's a genius marketing idea.
Well, and the other thing that's genius about Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically is, like, if you look at something like Pokemon, 100% a successful IP and arguably more successful than Yu-Gi-Oh! But the separation of a card game from the reality of the premise of the show is like, like you can have cards of all the Pokemon and that's exciting and there's a card game, but it like Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself was based on the understanding of like, you have these cards, they have something in them, and that like magical realism as a child of like, I'm holding the same object that my hero is holding in the show and that they're using. Like, that is an incredibly powerful tool that they leverage to be able to sell all of this product to essentially children.
It was the same thing with like having Pokeball toys, like being able to hold a Pokeball. I'm like, oh, I'm like using the same thing that I've watched these characters that I love in the show use a bunch of times too. So like you said, there was a little bit of a disconnect with Pokemon and Pokemon cards because you didn't really have that in the show. But like watching the show and you know, everyone got their favorite cards, their favorite characters and their decks, and then being able to ultimately use those exact same cards that you loved so much with your friends and battling with your friends was such a surreal experience as a kid.
Yeah, because now when you're playing the card game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, unlike Pokemon, you're actually living out what is a functional part of the show.
Right.
Like the Pokemon cards are an adaptation of the show, but the cards are actually like that's what the show is that these characters use these cards within the plot of the show. For people who don't know anything, we should probably lay out kind of what is the premise of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Long ago, when the pyramids were still young, Egyptian kings played a game of great and terrible power. But these shadow games erupted into a war that threatened to destroy the entire world, until a brave and powerful pharaoh locked the magic away, imprisoning it within the mystical Millennium items. Now, 5,000 years later, a boy named Yugi unlocks the secret of the Millennium Puzzle. He is infused with ancient magical energies, for destiny has chosen him to defend the world from the return of the Shadow Games, just as the brave pharaoh did 5,000 years ago.
I know it's a lot, but I'll leave it to you
If
guys.
you know, good for you.
Pretty much.
So, the premise of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed a little bit,
Yeah.
but essentially, you and your opponent have 8,000 life points, and the idea is that you attack your opponent's life points, and say you attack with a 2,000 attack creature, they lose 2,000
Yes.
life points, and so the idea is to get your opponent down to 0, and you can basically block your opponent from attacking you directly by having creatures on the field,
Yes.
and they have to have a clear field before they can attack you. So when we're talking like old school Yu-Gi-Oh, it was very much like defense versus offense. It was very
Gotten
much
more
like,
complicated
this
now
is a
as
defensive
time has
move.
gone on. Way more complicated now as time has
Jesus
gone on.
Christ, has it gotten more complicated? But yeah, at its core, it's essentially like a reactive strategy game.
Yeah.
You kind of have to react to what your opponent does and what your opponent activates, and there'll be times where you're like, oh, I could do this now, or I could save it for later, and so it's making that decision of, is this the right time to do
cards
this?
have synergy with one another
But-
too, so you can build spells off of
Yeah.
monsters and traps, and all that is, like Ben was saying, end goal being get your opponent's life points to 0, and there's a myriad of ways in which you can do that.
And that
I mean, that's not even like the only way. Like, we didn't even talk about like fucking Exodia.
right.
Exodia was
and
like
that's
the
one of
first alternate
that's-
win.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think that they did so successfully with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise that a lot of franchises miss on, and I think particularly Pokemon missed on this as well, is that because we, in particular, were there for when this took off, the franchise grew with us as we
Yeah.
grew. So, like, the game's simplicity at the beginning, the defense, offense, trap cards, effect cards, was enough for like an 8 to 10-year-old to understand. And as we've grown up and watched the franchise change, I mean, I think of 3 major periods within Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is kind of the initial 2 first animes that had come out, the movie that then
Yes.
shifted to the DX series, in which the main character changed and it got more complicated with like the different fucking robot cards that all link together, and then they move to the white cards and all that shit, and then kind of into this later half of even more complex and complicated. Like, as we aged and matured, the card game aged and matured along with us, and so it always could keep your interest as you never felt like you were growing out of something. It felt like it was evolving along with you, and I think that's an
Right.
incredibly powerful part of this that has kept people engaged for so
The
long.
double-edged sword to that, though, is if you don't keep up with it, then now you are very lost in trying to learn the new format and the new functions and everything.
For sure.
Yeah, and I mean that you were saying as a new player, how would you get into it? Like, there are ways. Like, it's really strange because the anime kind of functions on how to teaching you how to play. So there's like this whole mechanic called pendulum summoning, which is essentially you have 2 cards that have numbers on them. So it'll be between, say, 1 and 8, and that allows you to special summon any number of creatures between the levels of 2 and 7. As long as there's space, you can just throw them on the field. But if you watch the anime, it's kind of like a video game tutorial. He'll be like, I activate this, and now I have a gate between 1 and 8, which means I can do... And you're
World's
okay,
greatest tutorials, by the way. Just made a whole ass show to tutorialize a card game.
So again, since I'm the outsider coming in, I went and I watched the first episode of the
nice.
second anime to kind of get a sense of like, what's the plot of this? What is it? What's the shape of this thing?
Right.
And like within that first episode, he's dueling with the cards, and literally the show is telling you like, you're using this card, you should use this card, and it does this or that. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
If I was a kid, I'm like, I have my deck, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm gonna try that when I play my friend.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How can I use them to battle an expert like Kaiba?
For someone claiming to have faith, you're giving up too easily, Yugi. Listen, sometimes the cards are like a puzzle. You have to put all the different pieces in their proper place.
Like the Millennium Puzzle?
Exactly. Each piece helps build a greater entity.
Grandpa!
Like the pieces of a puzzle, Yugi. Remember.
Puzzle? When are the cards like a puzzle? Wait, Grandpa once said...
Duel Monsters contains only one unstoppable monster, Exodia, but he can only be summoned by drawing all 5 special cards. A feat that to this very day no one has ever accomplished.
Quit your stalling, Yugi, or you will forfeit the match.
I never forfeit. Another piece of the puzzle.
Draw any card you like, it won't change a thing. My dragons may be frozen for another 2 turns, but my new monster is under no such spell. The Judge Man, with an attack power of 2200.
I can attack with the Dark Magician, but he won't stand a chance once Kaiba's dragons are free of my spell. Dark Magician! Attack!
Exactly, and like even like Master Duel is the free game. Basically, there's a bunch of third-party simulators that people were using to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And there was this whole system where you didn't need to buy anything. You just downloaded this free simulator and it had all of the cards. And so Konami was like, whoa, we are missing out on a massive cash pot here. So they created Master Duel. And you can get all of the cards, but you have to earn credits and you have to buy in-game packs, and it's random. And it's a replication of the actual game. But that has in it structures where you can be like, right, this is how I normal summon. This is how I fusion. This is how I synchro. So it does teach you, and it must work, because like when you go to if you go to like what they call a YCS, which is basically like a big event where it's like a massive competition, thousands of duelists, and they'll have like offshoot tournaments for kids. So they'll have like an under 12s tournament where kids under 12 will battle each other and have their own like mini tournaments. So while their parents are playing in the YCS,
so cool.
Their kids can play in the tournament on the side. So whatever they're doing is working.
I think what it is too is exactly what you were saying. Like as we were kids, watching the anime kind of taught us these mechanics and taught us how to play the game. And as you fall off of watching that show more and more, you know, the kids that are watching the modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now that has pendulum summons in it, they're learning just from watching the anime. You know, that's how they're learning the game. So it's like if they're not watching that, then there's a little bit of a disconnect there of trying to just figure it out just right off the bat.
And I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Go ahead.
And it's weird. Sorry. No, as I say, it's weird because like the first arc of Yu-Gi-Oh!, like that whole, the very first season has like a legitimate, like you could watch that as an anime, like not even get into the card game. Like it's about a dude who granddad's soul gets stolen and it's his journey to go and rescue his granddad,
plot
basically.
too.
Right? But then you go on and progressively as the years went on, the anime kind of become more about facilitating the card game rather than like the other way around. So some of the plots, it doesn't really make any... Like, some of the plots are just like, oh, here's a dude and he wants to be a duelist, and that's the entire plot of the arc. It lost its way, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was weird in that later season where they turned to the camera and said, go to your local Walmart and buy Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards today. It's just not the same, you know? It just doesn't hit as much.
I was going to say, it benefits a lot from being kind of a little bit later in the cycle. So the first thing I remember being like this was Magic the Gathering. Because that kind of hit when I was midway through high school. And I remember having a few decks of that and playing with some friends. And then Pokemon kind of came along and said, hey, not only do we have a card game, but there's a show and video games and stuff. And then Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of was like, I see that and raise. You know, we'll do it this way.
Yeah. Well, did you know that... Konami actually got sued by Wizards of the Coast over Magic the Gathering
early on.
When Konami first released Yu-Gi-Oh, they weren't called spell cards; they were called magic cards.
Yeah,
and Wizards of the Coast actually put out like a lawsuit and basically a cease and desist, and had to recall a bunch of.
That's why they're called spells.
They all said magic cards.
Like,
so much money. I had so many magic cards.
Oh yeah, I probably still have some. I brought out in a true child fashion. I have a shoebox here that is full of my Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I guarantee there is some cards that are
all
magic.
PSA 10s, by the way.
Exactly, perfectly graded, perfect condition, not just running around in a shoebox for sure.
Yeah, so the thing that I really upset me as a kid is like. Yu-Gi-Oh! Around the end of the second season, after like the whole Battle City arc, They tried something different, and they were like, right, okay, we've got Yu-Gi-Oh! Here's Dungeon Dice Monsters.
I love Dungeon Dice
and
Monsters.
And it was like, what? And it was essentially like, the idea was each had like a commander, basically, and you had to use dice to, they like unfolded to create a path from your commander to the opponent's commander. And it was really, really cool. Again, it was very, very strategy heavy. It was like, right, if I place this here, then that means like this creature's going to attack that one. But it never took off because people weren't interested in dice and shit like that. They wanted to play Yu-Gi-Oh!
Because I feel like Konami and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Like that team had intentions of making this a big thing because they had board games for it. They had the anime was like a whole season. It was like 20 something episodes of this new mechanic, and then it just kind of went back to the old like way of playing games. So I feel like they had an intention of like, oh, we're changing it up. We're doing this new format. Here's this dice thing, but no one grabbed onto it, so everyone just bounced off of it immediately.
And it's really weird because like for me, as someone who like I've got all my fucking, I was saying to the boys like I've got my decks here. I'm gonna go back to locals next week.
Let's do Ben.
But let's do this. There's such a disconnect between the anime and like the actual TCG now because the decks these days. It is kind of about making or breaking your opponent's board, but then it's about getting down to 0 life points, but then there's this, people call it like the make board or break board. So, like, if you go first, you essentially, I should try not to swear. You essentially,
you don't have to try not to swear at all.
Good, because
awesome.
he wouldn't be
so
able to anyway, so it's okay.
No, you essentially, like, shit all of your resources out, and you make this board of all these different creatures, and you'd be like, right, I've got 7 negates. I can stop this, I can stop that. I pass my turn, it's your turn, and your opponent sits there and goes, I can't do anything about that, so I'm just gonna scoop and I'm just gonna quit, and we're gonna go on to the next one. And so it's lost its way a lot in the sense of like now there's a lot of like interaction on your opponent's turns, and there's this whole like system in the trading card game of like what they call hand traps. So the idea basically being like your opponent does something and on their turn you go, nope, I have this card in my hand that's not even on the field that says that you can't do that. And so it kind of becomes like, and then Jared said you get into like chaining, which is essentially when you respond to what somebody's done. And it's not like, I feel like I'm just ranting now, but it's not like with Magic. Like, so I do play a bit of Magic just on the MTG app, and the thing with Magic is that you have mana, so you have a set resource that you have to spend in order to do stuff, and what that does is that limits what can be done per turn.
Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't care about that.
No. If you want to do something on your opponent's turn, you need the mana to do it in Magic. In Yu-Gi-Oh, they don't care. As long as you've got the card to do it, you can do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a completely different trade card game.
I mean, I think the increase in complexity is due to an incredibly strong connection that we all had with the game as children, and then the people who are interested in pushing forward. Like, 8-year-olds aren't competitively playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, they could start, but they can. But what I'm saying is that those competitions, those events are started by adults who are very passionate about it and want to push the card game forward and want to make it, as interesting and complicated as possible in a lot of ways. And then those are the people who end up going and working for, Konami and developing the cards. And of course, it's going to keep getting more and more complicated, and the metas are going to change because that keeps competitive interesting. And so, like, I think in a sense, the thing that has removed me from playing the game, the complexity, is the thing that's kept it alive for so long. Yeah, it's the thing that has kept people engaged, because if it just got stale and it just stayed the same and it never evolved or changed and it never kept people interested, it would have died. But its staying power is the fact that it can adapt to a growing, very passionate community of players that want to see it evolve and change.
Oh, dude, I know people who have bought, like, when a new set will drop, they'll buy, like, 4 boxes. So they'll be, like, booster box will have 30-odd packs, and they'll buy, like 4 boxes of 30 packs, and I'll buy like 140 packs and sit there and open them and just see what they get. We called it cardboard crack. My group of friends that we called it cardboard crack because it's a fucking addiction.
Yeah.
You just sit there and you just open packs and you're like, oh, what did I get? Oh, cool, next pack. What did I get?
Well, I mean, it's just rare to have a game that evolves generally, right? Like, take chess hasn't changed in 500 years.
Exactly.
The rules of, people are still playing, soccer and football and baseball. Like, none of the rules of those games change very much over the course of decades. Mm-hmm. And here, this is kind of a modern phenomenon where these kinds of games can and really need to evolve and change in order to stay fresh.
Right.
That's just a unique feature of it, and I think it fits with their uniquely complex nature. Because what you're talking about is like, to be really good at this game, the game offers you a lot of different ways to approach something. It's a little bit like an RPG. It's like, do I want to be a wizard? Do I want to be, the barbarian? And there's no one wrong way to play, but you can develop your deck and your style around a certain motif or style. And because of that, they keep adding stuff to it that allows people to go like you said, I can combine this thing with that thing. Ooh, and then if I use that thing with it, now I got you.
A lot of metagaming for sure.
Yeah.
And there's also, like, what's really weird is, like, recently, so they have a ban list in the trading card game because I think there's something like 14,000 cards at this time, like, just different cards. And what they do is they release a card, and then somebody will go through the Yu-Gi-Oh! Database online and find a card from 2002 that breaks it, because there's a whole thing where cards never used to be once per turn, so you could use them multiple times, but newer cards have a clause where it's like you can only do it once on a turn. So people will take old cards and use them to break the new cards, and like the R&D department don't have enough time in between sets to test every single card that's ever come out and work out the interaction. So it's really interesting.
12,450.
And see, that's the interesting thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, right? Is that like over the span of its lifetime, over the span of having all of these cards, they had added more complex systems and everything like that, but all the cards for the most part are relevant, aside from like the ban list that people have made. But like from OG Yu-Gi-Oh! To now, there's cards that you can add into decks, into modern decks, which is a wild concept, which I don't think Pokemon is like that. I think they have a set of cards.
Pokemon has 14,569 cards.
That's insane.
But
you can't use them all. So
because Pokemon does what Magic does, which is that it has a standard format. So they only use like the last 3 or 4 sets. Correct. So the sets rotate out, so you can't use certain.
It's really the Wild West with Yu-Gi-Oh! Nothing matters.
Okay. There is 12,000 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! The ban list is 105 cards.
Insane.
Do you know how good you have to be at making games to have 12,000 of something and only 100 of those be game breaking? That is insane. And a lot of those are the original cards, ironically. Like a lot of those are monster revives and things that they put way at the beginning. So it's like, that is incredible levels of detail.
And they established, basically it started to become a problem, and Konami sat down and established this new wording system on Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So in order to play Yu-Gi-Oh, you have to basically have a fucking English degree, because there's lots of cards that like will say when this happens, and it's like that has to be the last thing that happens. So if something happens before, there's a lot of interactions of like, well, that doesn't say that. That says if.
I do think my reading comprehension increased significantly as a child from arguing with Jared about like effect cards.
Oh,
and being
there's
like,
so many.
No, that's what this says. What is this? And we're just like we're becoming little lawyers. We're like, no, subsection 8 of card B says that I can take your monster if
I actually am a lawyer in real life. That's what I do.
Oh, wow,
outside
that's
of this
cool.
podcast.
Oh,
and
well-
this all terrifies me. Like, all I do is look for complex interactions between too many rules, and this is too much. It's like
Well,
5 bar exams
Yu-Gi-Oh
worth of stuff.
is that.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so like this is a pendulum card.
Gross.
Can
Get
you
it outta
see
here.
It's
all
filtering
of that
out.
I
text?
can't read it, but I can see there's a lot of it, and it's very small.
Like that is 4 paragraphs of text in a very, very small box, and it will be like, for instance, when a pendulum monster you control is destroyed. So if a pendulum monster I control is destroyed, but my opponent activates an effect immediately afterwards, that's no longer when now, because it wasn't the last thing to happen.
It's
So
a lot. It's a lot of
honestly,
that.
you being a
yeah,
lawyer-
you probably need a lawyer next to you while you're playing to be like, actually.
Well, I was going to say, because like if you're in the middle of a tournament, you said there's over 12,000 active cards,
Yeah.
and someone pulls out one that you've never seen before, and then you have to sit there, and it's like, yeah, like you said, it's the Wild West, it's Calvin Ball, like whatever metaphor you want to use. Like, that's got to be very...
Trust me.
Some big arguments have probably erupted over
The thing you'll hear the most at like a YCS tournament is somebody about 20 foot away just going, "Judge!" and then the judge running over, because they'll have like 20 judges that just run from table to table because people are arguing about the semantics of the
I'd also
cards.
say too, it kind of like takes the stigma away from like not knowing what cards do, because I feel like in Pokemon or like these games like Magic that have like a set meta, like people start knowing what the meta is and what these cards do, and so like you're almost obligated to like, oh, when I play this card, the opponent should know what the effects are and what they do. In Yu-Gi-Oh, it feels like that's less of a stigma because there is so many different cards where it's like, what? I have no idea. What does that do again? And then it's like, okay, this is what this does.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot of reading at each other in a very condescending tone and be like, well, let me tell you. And you're like,
yeah. There's a lot of well, actually, when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh trading
The
cards.
people have gotten divorced over less, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's a big
100%.
Venn diagram of like Redditor, well, actually Andes and Yu-Gi-Oh players. Like I think they're all.
I mean, Kai and I have probably had so many arguments about Yu-Gi-Oh. Like so many angry, frustrated situations.
It's also really interesting because like when you go to a tournament, they'll have judges and then they have a head judge, and the head judge will do a speech at the beginning, and he'll be like, we're playing 4 rounds of Swiss. You get 40 minutes to play a best of 3 match, which sounds like a lot, but really is not fucking anything. And there'll normally be a bit where the head judge is like, my decision is final, because otherwise people will just argue and argue about the interaction of different cards. So there has to be someone who is like nope. And you just kind of have to take it or leave it.
I love the idea of a Yu-Gi-Oh lawyer now. Like, I want that to be like a job for someone, as being a Yu-Gi-Oh lawyer.
Yeah.
There's room for at least 1 or 2, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, 100%. Can we talk video games?
Yeah. Let's talk video games.
Because I actually have with me this game.
Is this the PS? Is it the
bane of my
PS1?
existence. It's the PS1.
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories.
Is that the
Not like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game whatsoever.
Is that the first one that they put out?
I think it's either the first or one of the first. Yeah. So you essentially play as a character who is trying to become the next best duelist, and it turns out you're a descendant of the pharaoh.
Yeah.
But there's this weird mechanic where you can just fuse random cards and hope that they work. So, like, say you have 5 cards in your hand. When you press up, one of the cards will, like, lift up a little bit to show that you've lined it up for a fusion. And the way it works is that you can... Say you've got 3 of them. The first 2 might fuse, but if the third one doesn't, it will knock out the newly fused card, and you're left with just the third one on its own. So there was a lot of trial and error, and being like, right, if I put this together, that works, awesome. And then the next card you'd end up with this like 3,000 attack creature, and you're like, oh my god, how the fucking hell did I make that? And then there's another card just comes along and goes boop and gets rid of it, and you're left with like this 600 attack plant creature, and you're like, bollocks.
There's 3 games before that, before Forbidden Memories.
Oh wow!
Really?
Yeah, and the first one, and this is how you know that localization sucked in the 90s. It's called Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsule Breed and Battle.
Ooh, that sounds like a problematic title.
That's not what you want.
Not at all, no.
No. And then on the Game Boy, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters came out in 1998. Dark Duel Stories came out in 1999 on the Game Boy Color, and then Forbidden Memories was 99 on the PlayStation.
Forbidden Memories was fun, but like
that was the first one to be
of...
released in the United States and Europe as well.
Oh, that would be why I thought it was. Yeah. The reason it's the bane of my existence is because to this day I have not completed that game, and it continues to be impossible to complete because you get to a point where like you end up going back in time, right, and basically fighting Seto Kaiba, who's the main protagonist of the second series. You end up fighting his descendant, and he just has like stupid, crazy creatures. So you end up basically having to grind, and this is like PS1 days of grinding. So you have to go back and refight previous duelists, and when you win, they'll give you a card, and you basically just have to hope that they give you the right card, because otherwise you cannot beat. So I've never ever completed that game. Probably about 2 decades later, I still, ever so often, I'll boot it back up and try again.
I can't. I
can't do it.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Duelist of the Roses?
I was going to say, that's the one
that's what I was going to say. So there's a lot of
well.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Games that I remember playing. it's in the closet though. I have the Game Boy Color Darkest Duel or whatever that one is. That one's fun. That one's a lot like
the
Pokemon TCG game on Game Boy. It's a lot like that kind of format. But the one I played a lot, that me and Kai played together a lot too, is the PS2 game called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses. And it's interesting because I think this also came into the time where like that the dice game was popular, because the gameplay is very similar to that. You kind of have almost...
Isn't it based on the War of the
Choose? It was based off the real world War of the Roses with like the Tudor Dynasty and everything like that, which is so weird. But they just added Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters into that to replace some of the like real world people, which was so strange. But the gameplay was essentially like Ben was saying before. You have 2 kind of leaders or head characters, and then you're placing down kind of your troops down to send over to the other side to defeat that head character. Think of games like Hearthstone or anything where you have a main head lead character, and then you're placing down troops and stuff to defend that. This was the same way, but me and Kai played so much of this game on PlayStation 2.
You know what's fucking crazy about this game?
What?
It's one of the best-selling PlayStation 2 games. It sold 1.4 million copies. That's how powerful of an IP this weird-ass esoteric, especially Duels of the Roses, which is not it's not a good game. I like Yu-Gi-Oh!, so it's fun, but it's not like an interesting game by any means. For it to sell 1.4 million copies is good on them.
No.
Good on them.
So people who don't know like games, like the PS2 is one of the best-selling consoles of all time, has some of the biggest titles of all time. So for this one Yu-Gi-Oh! Game to sell that many units, that's a big number for people who don't know video games. That's a lot.
Yeah, and like also a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well was like the card. It's also just the fucking artwork. Like some of the artwork on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards.
Well, trading cards in general,
good.
Pokemon cards have really cool art now too, with the full arts, and Magic cards have like insane art as well. Like card art is really cool.
I love the Magic the Gathering art. That's very just like classic, Dungeons and Dragons kind of fantasy stuff. That
exactly.
Heavy metal album covers all the way down, which I love.
Pretty much. Oh yes, pretty much.
And one thing I noticed about Yu-Gi-Oh!, just sort of like I said, dipping a toe into it, is it's like it does feel like, hey, we took the Pokemon idea, but Pokemon's real cute and cuddly. What if we put some more edge on it? And like the creatures, like even in that first episode, are like, oh, these are intimidating and scary in a way that like a Charizard is not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Blue Eyes White Dragon is that's obviously the iconic the iconic one, and in the series is interesting because there's only 4 of them. Kaiba has 3, and then he rips up the fourth one so that nobody else can own the
What a
copy.
little.
There was a
bitch,
lot of
by
that
the
in
way.
the anime where people like would rip up cards.
Really? I thought that was a fucking boss move. I was like, damn, he means business.
Wow, that says a lot about you. Back to the Duelist of the Roses thing, just real quick for some number comparison. So there are over 4,000 games released on the PS2. Duelist of the Roses is the 112th best-selling game,
that is
beating
insane.
out The Sims, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Gran Turismo, Crazy Taxi, Jack, Madagascar's movie, which is some reason up here, but all the NBA games, all of Tom Clancy games, like all of those games that are huge IPs, this dumbass little, honestly, like shitty kind of, not JRPG, but like similar in styling, was like beat all of those games just because of the popularity of the franchise at the time, which is
wild
crazy.
because again, this didn't
Fucking
even
wild.
like, aside from having similar cards, it was not played like Yu-Gi-Oh at all. Like the mechanics were completely different.
No.
Unfortunately,
It's the same as
Finding
Forbidden
Nemo
Memories.
did outsell it, though. So, you know, what are we really
no.
saying about
What's interesting, like, did you know that, like, in Yu-Gi-Oh, in the cards, there's lore in the cards themselves as well, which is what I find fascinating. So, what?
It's so much. It's so much information.
It's so much. But, like, so there'll be, like, different, well, they call them archetypes, but, like, it will be, like, you know, like, for instance, like, Blue Eyes White Dragon is an archetype, and there's a whole bunch of different Blue Eyes White Dragons and blah blah blah. But like, you'll be playing a card, and like the one that I know is World Legacy and Crawler, which is basically World Legacy are these humans and the Crawlers are these bug insects. But the cards work together.
Yeah.
So some of the cards will say like, "Oh, you can use this in a Crawler," and then when you look into it, there's like a fucking lore that like the Crawlers try to invade the world that the World Legacy are from, and the World Legacy are basically at war with the Crawlers, which is why you can use the two cards intermittently. And it's just like, I think one of the things that draws me to the game still is like the thought that goes behind making the cards. Like they're not just sets, you know, like okay, they are, but you know, the cards are being made, each of the archetypes have a story. There's a reason why they're made. And even, like, there's a whole thing you can go down of, like, there's a card called Forbidden Chalice, where, like, a girl, it's a picture of a girl holding a cup. And you can go through different cards, and she basically, like, gets found out to have taken this, like, cup that's a holy replica. And then there's a card called Solemn Scolding, and it's her being scolded by this man for having taken the cup. And then she turns evil when she's in a card called Witch's Strike, and she's like taking revenge
I
on
love
the guy
things
that
like that.
scolded
That's super
her.
cool.
Like, and it's like there's a story there, but unless you've got all of the cards in front of you, or unless someone tells you, you wouldn't know. And I think that's what I like about it. It's the same thing as like Five Nights at Freddy's. Don't play Five Nights at Freddy's. Love the lore of the series. Like, absolutely love listening to theory on it.
It sounds a little bit like if you played like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. If anyone's played those games where you go through the game, you pick up a sword or a helmet, and if you go in your inventory and look at it, it won't just be here's a helmet. It's here's some text that tells you something about the world, who owned it. Now imagine instead of like a few hundred of these, there's 12,000 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there's that. I think that's what I like, is that there's so much. Okay, they're making cards. It's a business. They want to make money, but there is a reason to it. There's thought and process between how cards interact in a lore level or a gameplay level, and it's interesting. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff. So
I see a huge difference between this and like the stuff I grew up with because of that level of thought and care.
Yeah.
Because like there was a lot of lore to some of like the 80s cartoons and things I grew up with, but for the most part they were just kind of shitting this stuff out to sell toys and just move marketing, which this
Yeah, He-Man only goes so deep.
Yeah. You don't need to know much about Man-at-Arms or any of those guys. But they're cool looking and all. But yeah, the lore of Castle Grayskull or whatever, it's just not there. It was never meant to be there. It was just like, hey, let's make a cool looking action figure, which mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly.
But for this, it's like, yeah, okay, they do obviously, yes, it's still a money making conveyor belt. But like you said, like there's a lot of people really making sure these cards all interact in a way that doesn't conflict, that the lore builds and is not, again, also like contradictory or goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Like there is a level of care because they know that they have this fan base that is going to be watching and paying attention.
That feels like a massive
one
task
time.
too. Like that feels like a wild task of balancing this game and having, like Kai said, having 12,000 cards and only needing 100 to be banned. Like that's some wild balancing that you're doing.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, like they've only messed up one time where they released an archetype called Spiral, which was so insanely powerful, and they did not see how people would play it through, that it came out a week later. It was at a tournament, and something like 97% of the top 40 decks were Spiral. And so they launched their first ever emergency ban list. Normally they're at set times throughout the year, but at that point Konami were like, nope, this is too much. People are not enjoying the game. We're putting a break on it. So there is that level of care.
Do you guys have any favorite moments from the cartoon or the movies?
Oh, I mean the movie, the first Yu-Gi-Oh movie, like that was such a big deal when it came out. Like I remember going to theaters and watching this, and then one of the big like selling points, and the thing that was on the front cover was like the blue eyes shining dragons. You got that card when you went into the theaters to like watch it. But I remember it being a huge spectacle.
I'm pretty sure we saw it together.
I think we saw it together. We saw the Yu-Gi-Oh movie together.
We went together to go see that movie.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah. That was probably one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh moments, for me, seeing the movie.
Yeah, I remember seeing the movie, and it was a massive deal. But for me, it's really weird. Everyone kind of talks about like the moment in the anime where Yugi successfully summons Exodia for the first time. So you have to have there's 5 pieces of Exodia, each one's their own card, and if you get all 5 in your hand, you win the game automatically. It doesn't matter about life points, doesn't matter about you win. And no one's ever done it before, and Yugi manages to do it for the first time, and everyone talks about that. For me, there's a bit in Duelist Kingdom where Kaiba has 3 blue eyes white dragons on the field, which is massive anyway, right? Like you need to tribute 2 monsters in order to summon a blue eyes white dragon. So he manages to get 3 onto the field, and you're like, oh fuck, these are the only 3 in the world. This is massive. And then he's like, but wait, there's more, and he fuses them together to make this like triple-headed,
like Hydra,
blue eyes white dragon Hydra creature. And I remember sitting there like, oh my, how the hell is Yugi gonna beat this? Like, what the hell?
You think you've taken things to the next level? Very well. You've given me no choice but to ritual summon and take things to the maximum level. You said I couldn't get to you with blue eyes. Well, I can with this. Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon!
Because that was the moment where it was like that again. That was like never ever done. Like people didn't fuse blue eyes.
Well, that was the
together.
thing with the movie too. I mean, the whole anime is like Yugi doesn't lose, right? And there's times where he gets like kind of close, but mostly in like normal battles, he never gets close to losing. And that
heart of the cards,
exactly, out of the heart of the cards. And that's why the movie was so big, because it was like, oh, he's gonna lose. Like he's straight up gonna lose.
Yeah. I mean,
I think I was a little too young to really deeply connect with the original. Like I watched the original anime and I enjoyed it, but we watched it together a lot. And I watched the original movie in theaters, but I think DX was the first time I really got invested.
Jaden,
like I remember
the Elemental Heroes and everything.
Elemental Heroes, and I remember coming home after school in the 4th and 5th grade and like beelining it to my brain, because I think it was on it must have been on at like 5 or like 4:30. So I would do my homework and I would like beeline it, and I had this tiny ass like I think it must have been 12-inch like CRTV that I would just like sit 3 inches from and absorb the anime like as it came on to WB Kids, just being like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, and like, you know, have my cards out and watching it and being like, this is incredible.
I just had a random flashback. Sorry, do you remember? Doug, you wouldn't, but like, do you boys remember? There's an episode in the first season where Yugi is fighting. He's dueling against a woman called Maya Valentine, and her whole shtick is that she's psychic. She knows what card she's about to draw, and she's like drawing all these things. She's like, right, I'm about to do this, and she's like, oh look, I'm right, and she's doing it all, and she's getting in Yugi's head, and then all of a sudden he's like, what's that? And she's like marks her cards with perfume.
That's
so
what
she
it
knows
was.
what comes
I do
to
remember
come.
that.
And like that moment of like
Yugi
Yugi realizing, like, yeah, that moment of Yugi realizing, like, oh, she isn't psychic. There's a gimmick. She's essentially a con woman. Because that was how she won. She got into people's heads and basically made them choke, and that's how they lost the duel. So that was a big moment of him, like, because he was like, oh my god, like, again, like, how's he going to beat this woman's psychic? How the hell is he going to beat
One of my
her?
other favorite moments from the anime, too, because I guess it starts very straightforward with just, like, Yugi battling Duelist Kingdom. I mean, the whole plot is saving his father's soul, so I mean, that's a little far-fetched and wild in the first place, but it gets crazy. And talk about like big hype moments with cards. One of the big like arc after like Exodia was these things called the Egyptian God cards, which were kind of like these sought over. They're like throwaway cards now. You can find them everywhere. They're not like a big deal, but at that time, they were these 3 cards individually were all such a big deal. They were hard to find, and not only were they hard to find in real life, but they were like sought after cards in the anime. So it was almost like this weird real world and like show connection where like they're rare in the show, and you also can't find them in real life too. So there's had this like huge weight to them. And there's an antagonist that ends up showing up. His name is Merrick.
Merrick, thank you. I was trying to think.
Merrick, and
he's an amazing,
really good antagonist. But there's all this whole dynamic with them, and then these 3 ancient cards, and that sets up the whole plot of like, you know, this ancient history of these creatures and everything like that. But the Egyptian gods were such a huge point in Yu-Gi-Oh for me. I didn't even own them until later on, but it was something that was always sought after. Like, you always wanted these 3 cards.
Want to pivot to 2 not anecdotal, real stories about this franchise in my life that I think are the 2 most important or like most memorable moments. Right. One was my parents worked at high schools, still do, for most of my childhood, and my dad was a security guard for high schools and still is, and so he would have to chaperone dances. And so I would have to go with him to these high school dances as a kid.
Yes, I
and often just sit alone by myself as gross teenagers grounded on each other for like hours at a time. But I brought my prized Yu-Gi-Oh deck to one of the school dances, and it was like an outdoor, like, I don't know, fucking beach themed dance. And I was just sitting at the table, and I went to go get a drink, and I left my deck on the table of the dance. And when I went back, it was gone. Ooh. And I think that was probably one of the saddest, like, most devastating moments of my childhood. And then the other story is I was in middle school, and I was a very young entrepreneur type, and I would carry a metal case that was a poker chip box
of Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Like, weird, like cheap,
like Kaiba.
Yeah, 100%. But I would carry it around, and it had Yu-Gi-Oh written on the side of it in literal Sharpie that I had, and I would sell card packs. So I would take all the shitty cards, because I had so many cards at this point, that I would put them together. I'd rubber band them with the backs facing each other. And I would tell kids, like, I would sell them for $5 a piece. And I would tell them there's one rare card in every pack. And, like, I was a great salesman. I made hundreds of dollars. And my parents found out I was doing this at school. Yeah, and they made me donate it to the church, which was the meanest shit ever. I was fucking caked up, all right? And they were like, "Nope, you have to."
Well, you are selling Yu-Gi-Oh cards at the school, so probably not the.
Hey, you know what? Some people would look at that as entrepreneurial spirit. They'd be like, he's
Yeah.
a businessman, and that's what his future.
He's a hustler.
Exactly.
That's-
Not my parents. They were like, you are a sinner in the eyes of God. I'm like, fucking Jesus Christ.
I remember my mate slapping down a dark magician in a duel once, and nobody knew he had it, and that was a proper like, oh, like everyone was like, oh.
One more memory that I have. It's a funny one. It's not necessarily a good one. Again, like I talked about before, as kids, you would like play for keeps. So you would like offer up cards, and you'd be like, oh yeah, if I win, I get this card. And I remember going in really confident with one of my friends, and then losing, and then not wanting to give him the card, and like locking myself in the bathroom and crying because I didn't want to give away this card. I was really young.
Here's even worse. Okay, I had this friend, Michael Laub, in grade school.
I know this name.
And
he was notorious.
He had a card that I really wanted. Like, I can't even remember what it is to this day. But I went over to his house, and he was like, oh, I'm going to use the bathroom. And I pocketed the card when he was in the bathroom.
Oh, you
and he never found out to this day. Michael,
if
Laub,
you're listening,
sinner in the eyes of God.
Here's his address. You can go find him.
Yeah, I
See, that's why you had to donate all the money to the church.
I know.
Man.
I really
God
was a
knew.
shithead as a child, so it probably was good that I got caught and learned a lesson. But yeah, it makes you do crazy things.
Well, we're sort of coming up on time, so I like to kind of end the podcast by asking you guys, why do you think it is that Yu-Gi-Oh has endured the way it does? And this is one that's not just lives on in people's hearts nostalgically. This is still going strong today, and not just because it kicks the shit out of Pogs or whatever, but like, tell me in your thoughts, why do you think it is that people still have this undying love for Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think we talked about it as almost a gripe, right? That the game is super complicated and everything like that too. Ultimately, if we took the time to learn the mechanics, that's the only difference. Is that me personally, I don't take the time to learn these kind of things, and when it doesn't work right away, it's frustrating. But Yu-Gi-Oh continuously adapting and changing the meta, and still finding a fantastic way of incorporating old cards. Like we said so many times, 12,000 cards and only 100 unusable. Like, that's impressive to make your game that balanced through the 20 plus years that this franchise has been going on. And Kai had pointed out too, like, you kind of have to adapt. Like, if it was the same thing as OG Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't think they would have lasted as long. But they continue to innovate, they continue to change, they continue to incorporate new and interesting ways to do this. There's XZ cards, there was fusion summons, there was now Pendulum is the new meta and the new system that they're doing. So I think just 100%, I think nostalgia and love for the franchise has helped it for sure. But I also think that it's, Konami and this Yu-Gi-Oh team continually adapting this game and changing the format that has really helped prolong it too. I think them continuously updating and changing the meta and everything for Yu-Gi-Oh has kept Yu-Gi-Oh afloat. And the continued addition of the anime has just kept younger kids. They're continuously pulling kids back in, and the nostalgia and the love of the game has kept all of the long-term fans in. So they're doing a great job. Whatever they're doing, they're killing it. Yeah, that was the end of my thought. It was just that's it. So Kai, you can kick it off.
Yeah, go ahead, Kai.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's been very interesting to watch Yu-Gi-Oh, especially over the past couple years, I think, struggle a little bit with its relevancy outside of its core audience. I think Pokemon got very lucky in that the games were the largest part of the franchise for a broad part of its existence and were able to kind of carry its relevancy, and then had such an impactful kind of experience with a lot of huge content creators like Jake Paul and people who ended up, buying a lot of those cards and bloating the market in a sense over the pandemic, where it really spiked people's focus into that world. And I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh is going much of the way that Magic has, in which it has kind of cyclical periods of relevancy and then kind of fading back into the, place that it sits of just like, oh, there's like a strong community, but it's not something that, it's not 2006 anymore. I can't go to any kid on the street and be like, oh, do you know what Yu-Gi-Oh is? The chances are probably not. Like, probably they haven't really meaningfully engaged with Yu-Gi-Oh's IP broadly, and like, I think that's okay. Like, I think it's great. It's something that I fondly remember, and as I said, it was one of the first pieces of IP that I really connected with in a way that I never had before. and really brought me into its world and its lore and made me care about something, and that is deeply important to me. And I think as long as it keeps offering that to the people who still care about it and who played it and still, create metas and competitively play, as long as it is serving that audience, I think it'll always maintain some of its relevancy. It just, it may not be the behemoth that it was ever again. And I think that's okay. I don't expect it to be. I think it's good that we're moving on and evolving and new things will come. But it is truly, I think, a fantastic, just entire universe of things that you can engage with. And if you haven't spent the time to, interact with any of the IP, whether the card game or the anime or any of the games that are on multiple systems, give it a try. Give the anime a try. Give it a watch. It's short and quippy, and it was definitely of that generation that was made for a younger audience. It was made to be cartoony rather than kind of the more serious animes of Hunter x Hunter and those more adult focused animes. But it's still, I think, especially the second iteration of Yu-Gi-Oh holds up in a sense of being an interesting story. And while yes, it is essentially a tutorialization of the card game, it does have its own merits as an artistic kind of thing. And so I think I'm interested to see where it goes. I really don't have a good answer of what it looks like. Maybe it will have another heyday, maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't, but I am deeply appreciative of it regardless, because it did play an incredible role in my youth, and I am grateful for that.
Ben, how about you?
I just wanted to say, I was wondering while Kai was talking, I looked up attendance for the YCS events I was talking about, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series. This year in May, Philadelphia, 2,396 people, 3,225 people in LA, 3,500 in London. Those are big ones. Don't get me wrong, there are smaller ones that are a couple of hundred people. But I think I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at a point now where I think it's established. I don't think it's actually going to go anywhere. It's been said before about how older people are sticking with the game because it changes. Younger kids are coming in because of that social aspect and, the sort of trading card side of it. I have traded with younger kids, that sounds really weird, but 14, 15-year-olds at locals, they'll be there and you still trade with them. You don't get me wrong, you're not
you're
going out
on
of your
a
way
different
to talk
kind
to
of
them.
ban list if you keep doing that. You know what I'm
So
saying?
there's kind of an unwritten rule at Yu-Gi-Oh places that if you're looking to trade cards, you have your binder on the table next to you. And so all people do is come over and it's oh, is that your trade binder? And you're yeah, sure, have a look. And people will look. That's the level of interaction that it takes at locals. You definitely can't, as a 30-year-old man, walk up to a 14-year-old and be do you want to
Just
trade
go to the
cards?
playground and be you want to trade cards, kids?
Yeah.
Not going to work out well for you.
And I think it's here, and I think the work by Konami in terms of the lore, the way that the game plays, the mechanics, and everything holds it together. But honestly, I think a big part of it is the community.
Yeah,
in the community, there are esteemed the people who are known to be active Yu-Gi-Oh players. But even then, there's what they call the GOAT format, which is basically a ban list between certain years that Yu-Gi-Oh community as a whole considers to be the golden age of the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. So they run off of that ban list. I've been to locals where they do a 2.5, what they call a 2.5 ban list. So they'll take out the stuff that's meta and try and give some of the lower performing decks a place to shine because there's not those meta cards in there. And I think it shouldn't be understated how much the community around Yu-Gi-Oh is such a big part of what keeps it alive. Konami can release all the cards they want, but for whatever reason, the community has come together and wants this game to stay alive, and that's a massive reason as to why it has, I think.
I agree with that. I think, even as an outsider, I can recognize what's special about this. And for any franchise or IP to run this long and stay this successful, like capitalism can only force something to exist and be popular for so long. I'll give an unrelated example, but like the logo for this podcast is I tweaked a version of the original Legend of Zelda. And that's a franchise that's been around since 86, since I was a kid. And Nintendo could have kept pumping out the same kind of Zelda games forever, but the reason it's lasted this long is that they dramatically reinvented themselves multiple times and very recently did it again. And there's something about that, like the audience, you can't fool an audience. Like you can give them stuff, it can be okay, but it won't connect at this level without it intrinsically being like inherently good. And like you said, Yu-Gi-Oh has this kind of winning combination of like, it's an interesting IP, it's sort of weird and dark, but it also is this communal, like ongoing evolving process that keeps everybody engaged. And like that's a very special form of alchemy that's basically, with the like rare exception of Pokemon before it, like it's basically never been duplicated and may never be duplicated again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we're waiting for Digimon to take off. Still to this
Digimon,
day.
like they still have games
right
though.
there.
Like, they've been going hard with games.
Yeah, Digimon. Do you know what did actually really, really take off was
Final
Fantasy
too. I remember that.
Bakugan took off, Final Fantasy, and they did a Dragon Ball trading card game.
I competed in Beyblade competitions.
Oh my gosh.
Beyblades.
Oh, boy.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, that was another horrible IP from that generation.
Communities ruled everything.
So I want to give you guys an opportunity to, upsell yourselves in the Play Along podcast. Tell our audience where they can find your stuff and tell them all about it.
I feel like I always do this. I feel like one of you should do it.
And there's a good reason you always do it.
Fine, I'll do it. Yeah, so we are the Play Along Podcast. We play through games in kind of like a book club format. The three of us all each take turns choosing a game, and then we break that game up into sections and then come together each week to talk about those sections. Kind of like a book club, but for video games. But you can find all of our content on playalongpod.com or anywhere you find podcasts, just Play Along Pod. And then our socials as well, Play Along Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And Threads. Go follow us on Threads now, because that's the next new social media platform. We are on Threads, yeah. You knew there's new social media, man. I had to get back on it. I had to get on it.
Does the outros because he knows things that neither of us do.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for dropping by, guys. I really am glad to be able to learn a lot more about this subject. Just again, just being the old man that I am. It's this thing that I've seen around, and I'm like, yeah, that Yu-Gi-Oh thing. I kind of have an idea what it is, but it's been great to really delve into it. And I'll just as I want to upsell your podcast too, because it's great. Because I sure love video games a whole bunch. So listening to you guys talk about it is awesome, and it's neat to hear your perspectives. Because I remember it was like, I got to listen to a couple of their episodes and really get. It was like, let's listen to Chrono Trigger. Oh, they're not so hot on it. How about Shadow of the Colossus? No, not so much. Oh no, I'm entering into the forest of hot takes. We're gonna be in trouble.
You jumped in on both of our hot takes. I mean, don't even touch our Super Mario RPG episode if you don't want to have nostalgia ripped away from you.
I love Shadow of the Colossus. I'm just
you've got a whole library of wonderful things to talk about. We have plenty of video game episodes on here too, if that's your beat. But of course, we've covered lots of movies, TV shows, everything else. So if you have thoughts on this episode or our recent ones, you can of course tweet it to @NostalgianPod or find us at Nostalgium Arcanum on Instagram, and please go there, because that's where we post bonus stuff throughout the week. And we're not on Threads yet. Looking for a lifeboat. Could be Threads. Could join there. Not sure what we're going to do yet.
Twitter is slowly sinking.
Yeah, it is. It's just watching that thing go down the drain, nice and slow. So if you have thoughts on this, recent episodes include Doom, 1993's Doom. So there's a video game one for you. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Before that was My Cousin Vinny. And what was before that one? Chrono Trigger was the one we did, so you can hear us glowingly talk about that.
Yeah,
game.
if you want a better perspective on Chrono Trigger than ours, then you should probably go listen to that.
Man, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It
was a good episode too. It hasn't come out yet as of the time of this recording, but it was fun.
We also did an episode on Doom 93, so if you want to hear us talk about Doom, which we all really enjoyed it, go check that out.
Yeah, that game holds up like a champ.
It really does.
Really good.
Yes.
And so If you have thoughts on that stuff, please write in. And of course, like, rate, subscribe. You know what? You've heard a podcast before. You know what to do to let them know you like it. So with all that, thanks again, guys, for coming on. And until next time, that is...
thanks for having us.
Sure. And until next time, that is one more entry in the Nostalgium Arcanum.
You play any poker, Yugi?
I love cards! My grandpa told me to always believe in the heart of the cards.
What can I say? The kid loves cards.
Game's 5-card draw. One-Eye Jacks or Wild. Okay?
Sounds good to me.
No problem.
Excellent. You gonna pick up your cards there, buddy?
I have no need.
Okay. Anyone else?
2 for me.
I'll take 4.
Well, I'm gonna raise you fellas $2.
I'm out.
Of course. Chuck?
Oh, too rich for my blood.
How about you, Yugi? You gonna fold like these chumps?
I don't like that smile on his face. He could have anything in his hand.
You have to believe, Yugi. When you have faith in yourself, the card...
He doesn't do this at work, I swear.
My friends believe in me. I can do this!
This hand's not over yet, Dave. Reveal your cards.
Read him and weep. 2 pair 8s over 3s.
Not so fast. Your overconfidence has been your undoing. Your 2 pair might be impressive, but you will find that it will take more than that to defeat an opponent who is pure of heart. The most powerful thing in the world is friendship. So allow me to introduce you to 3 of my oldest friends. The 3 Jacks!
What the actual fuck?
And now, my Jacks, draw your weapons and destroy his 2 pair!